For Lois Antony, the question of whether God exists was an intensely important question growing up. In her essay For the Love of Reason, Antony shares her personal experience of being a devout Catholic and then becoming an atheist. At the center of this shift for Antony is reason, especially rational discussion. Antony's shift in social identity from being a Catholic to a secular atheist covers the first two parts of the essay. Antony goes on to clarify the nature of reason. She wants to show that reason need not be focused on individual self-interest, nor opposed to human emotions. In the concluding part of her essay, Antony reassesses religion as a secular atheist. This involves analyzing the psychology of religious belief, as well as reinterpreting a well-known biblical story. Antony begins her essay discussing the Catholic theological doctrine of limbo. Before examining Antony's concerns about limbo, let me first briefly provide background for anyone unfamiliar with Christian theology, specifically the doctrines of limbo and original sin. According to Catholic doctrine, limbo describes what happens to morally good but unbaptized people. The ritual of baptizing infants is thought to wash away original sin. Original sin, another Christian theological doctrine, claims that all humans have inherited the sin committed by the first man, Adam, in the Garden of Eden. This story originally comes from Genesis in the Hebrew Bible. Adam is the first man, and he commits the first sin by eating from the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. As a child, Antony was troubled by the idea that extremely good people who performed morally excellent deeds, would not be accepted into heaven. Think of people like Gandhi, who peacefully helped hundreds of millions of people gain their political independence. According to the doctrines of limbo and original sin, the eternal fate of other people's souls depended on whether Lois Antony and other Christians could ensure that every human in the world is baptized. This is part of why Christianity emphasizes converting non-Christians, in contrast to religions like Judaism that don't actively recruit new members. Looking back on how she questioned adults about limbo as a child, Antony recognizes three distinct responses she got. First, adults would usually say that souls in limbo, unlike hell, do not suffer. Antony describes this as a perfunctory response because it was expected to be accepted without any critical scrutiny. But even as a young kid, Antony considered this first response as obviously false. As a Catholic child, Antony believed the beatific vision of God in heaven was the most valuable experience for any human being. If being excluded from the most valuable thing in the universe isn't suffering, then what is? In the second response, adults would claim that souls in limbo are unaware they are being deprived of heaven. While this response is more creative, Antony notes that this reasoning contradicts normal ethical reasoning. Antony uses the example of hiding chocolate from her sister. This would be morally bad even if her sister never found out about the chocolate. The third and final type of response to Antony would in some way tell her that she's overthinking the question. Calling God's existence a mystery of faith suggests that the human mind cannot fully comprehend the metaphysical truth of God's existence. Thus, human belief requires faith to know God's existence. The more general message that Antony concluded from this final type of response was that thinking about religious matters was only okay if the thinking was limited to its proper place. In other words, it's wrong to overly scrutinize questions such as whether Gandhi can go to heaven. In short, Antony concluded that questioning church doctrine was sinful. But despite these sorts of troubles, Antony grew up devoutly religious. She says that religion was part of every day of her life. The two main moral lessons she internalized was, first, the human soul is immortal and intrinsically valuable, and second, humans' main moral duty on earth is to demonstrate love for God by performing virtuous deeds. Religion was part of Antony's life, partly due to a continual sense of guilt. This portion of her essay helps illustrate how much Catholicism meant to Lois Antony, framing and guiding her life into young adulthood. Antony paints a complex picture. She shows how Catholicism positively informed her life by motivating her to do virtuous things, but also how the religion created other character traits, from the guilt to a fetishistic attachment to taking the sacrament during church service. Philosophy's emphasis on rational dialogue was a turning point in Antony's life. The second half of the essay describes how Antony's love and dedication to the Catholic Church is replaced by love and dedication to reason and rational inquiry. Antony experienced a crisis of faith in the middle of her first philosophy course. None of the most influential proofs of God's existence were satisfactory. Even more problematic was the problem of evil, namely, how could an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving God allow the existence of evil in the world? One of the most common attempts at addressing the problem of evil claims that humans' free will is the source of worldly evil, and God permits this freedom in order to see who will voluntarily choose to do what's morally right. Antony found this defense disturbing. Even if it were necessary to allow humans to show whether they would choose good or evil, why not prevent the worst evils from occurring? Wouldn't it be possible for God to punish these evildoers before they accomplished the worst things they intended to do? Antony had a crisis of faith, in part because she was unable to imagine the world without a God. But Plato's dialogue, Euthyphro, changed Antony. Euthyphro's paradox concerns the nature of divine power. In Plato's dialogue, the paradox is expressed in terms of divine power's relationship to piety. But the paradox equally applies to divine power's relationship to moral goodness. Is something morally good only because God decided that it should be good, or is moral goodness independent of any divine will? Antony, like Socrates, prefers the second option, namely that moral goodness is an eternal, unchanging truth rather than something arbitrarily chosen by a divine power. This was a powerful insight for Antony. If the value of goodness is independent of a divine agent, then she no longer felt the need to believe in God. Antony describes being liberated from the feeling to need to have faith in the existence of God. This is the moment at which it became possible for Antony to be an atheist. More broadly, Antony commits herself to the standard of reason and rational discussion. Reason plays many important functions, such as providing a common ground to talk to very different people. By contrast, faith raises a number of very difficult questions. The biggest question is which ideas deserve faith. Because of faith's fundamental irrationality, it is highly suspect how rationally examining the problem could ever provide a satisfactory answer. Antony examines common uses of faith. Most commonly, a person notes that something hasn't been proven false. For example, there is no conclusive proof that God does not exist. From this, the person concludes that faith entitles them to the belief, in this case, the belief that God does exist. This pattern of reasoning looks highly suspect if applied to other possibilities. If no one has proved that aliens are living in the center of the earth, does this entitle a person to the faithful belief that aliens are there? And if Antony's alien example seems fanciful, consider the more recent religion of Scientology, which asserts the existence of many different kinds of aliens. Antony distinguishes between two senses of rationality. The first sense depicts reason as cold and uncaring, concerned only with self-interest. This depiction of reason is opposed to any emotions or sentiments, which is why it disregards other people. Ebenezer Scrooge, pictured at the bottom left, is an example of cold, self-interested reason. Scrooge, a fictional character from Charles Dickens' story A Christmas Carol, only cared about making money. The second sense of reason is logical reflection. Logical reflection is not opposed to emotions and feelings. Indeed, logical reflection can be a valuable tool in understanding one's feelings. Likewise, this broader sense of logical reflection is not opposed to creativity. But logical reflection is opposed to idiocy. As an example, Antony criticizes the movie Miracle on 34th Street. In the movie, a person working as a Santa Claus in a shopping mall turns out to be the real Santa Claus. Antony dislikes the movie in part because it implies that reason is merely a matter of cold self-interest, while Santa Claus represents the caring parts of human nature. For Antony, by contrast, reason is the central means that we use to care for other people. It's reason that helps us find common ground, especially with people from very different religious and cultural backgrounds. Taking a more general view of religious belief, Antony notes that some people simply are unaware of their religion's metaphysical claims. These people may identify with a religion more as a social identity than as an explanation of what the universe is like. It's also possible to superficially endorse metaphysical claims like limbo or original sin without sincerely believing in the claims. Evidence for this scenario includes if a person has not carefully thought about the consequences of such beliefs. The character of Euthyphro, from Plato's dialogue Euthyphro, would be an example of this type of situation. Euthyphro contradicts himself multiple times because he hasn't considered the implications of his various beliefs. Meanwhile, Pascal's wager offers a very different reason to believe in God. According to Pascal, it is pragmatic to believe in the existence of God. That is to say, it is a prudent thing to do, since it would be very bad if you didn't believe in God but ended up being wrong. This style of argument has the benefit of suggesting why a person should have faith in the existence of God, but not in the existence of aliens in the center of the earth. But for Antony, the commitment to reason undermines this pragmatic argument for believing in God. The commitment to reason entails that a person should not believe in something that does not make sense. Furthermore, there are profound reasons to doubt God's existence, such as the problem of evil. Pascal's pragmatic argument would appear more reasonable if reason were limited to the cold, self-interested rationality exemplified by Ebenezer Scrooge. But the notion of logical reflection asks us to listen to reason regardless of what might be in our individual self-interest. In conclusion, Antony revisits the biblical story of Adam and Eve. As noted earlier, Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden after Adam ate from the tree of knowledge. This was a sin because God had forbidden Adam from doing this. The story's most common moral lesson is to follow God's commands, that is, don't disobey God's orders. But looking at the story as an atheist, Antony draws a very different moral lesson. She understands the story as highlighting the immense godlike power of reason and knowledge. With great power comes great responsibility, and accordingly, with power comes the opportunity to make mistakes. But Antony thinks reason and knowledge are so valuable that they are worth suffering for.